Walter Gropius was one of the most renowned designers and architects from the early 20th century. His influence can be seen to this day in many areas of modern life and contemporary design. Not only was Gropius a pioneer of modern architecture, he was also involved in founding the Bauhaus, a revolutionary design school from Germany that created the Bauhaus movement. The Bauhaus completely rethought the design education system in ways we still see in universities today. By respecting craft as much as it did art, it brought many disciplines together under one roof, which forced the intermingling of designers with different backgrounds and skills, elevating the knowledge of the community as a whole. Later, the Bauhaus incorporated a number of mass production techniques into its curriculum, creating a community of designers ready to make a massive impact on the world during a time of mass industrialization. The school developed some of the most well-known names in modernist design, as well as attracted many well-established artists and designers currently practicing their respective disciplines to contribute to the growing ecosystem of designers. Although its existence was relatively short-lived, the Bauhaus and the design ethos associated with it were hugely influential across the world. This was particularly prevalent in the United States, where many of the artists moved before and during the Second World War to escape persecution by the Nazis. Gropius had a massive impact on the state of design during his practicing years, many of which outlasted his time on Earth. One of these was spreading his belief that design should be approached through a lens of problem solving rather than simply the ornamentation and beautification of objects. He applied this ethos to beyond what is typically thought of as design, to wider social issues, which included designing affordable housing post-war and working to improve physical conditions for factory workers through his architecture and design practice. While many factories at the time were dark and depressing, Gropius utilized massive sheets of glass to bring light to an otherwise dull environment. Beyond pushing the field of design and architecture into revolutionary new directions, Gropius also rethought a number of time-tested construction practices. As an advocate for social change and affordable housing, Gropius experimented with the idea of prefabricated units to reduce construction costs, as well as brand new materials and building practices like reinforced concrete. Beyond his revolutionary design ethos and development of modern construction practices, Gropius was also one of the founders of modernism in the United States. His building of the Gropius House and time spent lecturing at Harvard University proved hugely influential on the state of American design and architecture. At the time Gropius came to the States, his ideas were in stark contrast to the existing state of the field. While the US was largely still building structures similar to European buildings of the past, Gropius's highly logical and rigid style of buildings with flat roofs, a lack of ornamentation, and a sense of truth to material acted as a soft reset to the field of American architecture and design. He was also an advocate for seamlessly blending interiors and their surroundings through a heavy use of glass. At the time, many buildings sought to differentiate interior and exterior spaces by creating a unique internal environment protected from the outside world. Gropius threw that idea to the wind and developed spaces that worked harmoniously with their environments, embracing the beauty of the outdoors rather than fighting against it. To get a full understanding of how Gropius became so influential, it's important to understand his background. Walter Gropius was born in Berlin to his father Walter Adolf Gropius, a German government official, and mother Manon Augusta Pauline Scharnweber, the daughter of the Prussian politician George Scharnweber. His parents, being of this status, were obviously quite wealthy and well-connected. As a result, Gropius enjoyed his summers on the estates of affluent family members. This could have been the time where Gropius began to appreciate the beauty of the outdoors, which would later come to inform many of his architectural decisions. His father, Walter Gropius Sr., had a strong interest in architecture. Additionally, Gropius's uncle, Martin Gropius, was a well-known architect. Martin Gropius's biggest commission was the design of the Museum of Decorative Arts in Berlin. We can see that Gropius had many architectural influences from an early age, likely leading him down his future career path. After a childhood passion for architecture blossomed, at the age of 20, Gropius enrolled to study architecture at the technical school in Munich and subsequently the Königliche Technische Hochschule in Berlin. He eventually cut his education short when he inherited a large sum of money from his great-aunt. Although his studies at the Hochschule were almost complete, he dropped out without taking the final exam, which demonstrated an early disregard for traditional methods of education which foreshadowed his development of the Bauhaus movement. In 1908, Gropius was recruited to join the office of the renowned architect and designer Peter Behrens, who was considered by many to be the first industrial designer. Behrens was a creative consultant for the large German industrial company AEG. Here, Gropius developed lifelong relationships with Ludwig Mies van der Rohe and Le Corbusier, who were working out of the same studio. Under the guidance of Behrens, Gropius worked on the innovative AEG turbine factory and factories for the Krupp company. Working on these industrial projects showed Gropius the possibilities of new materials and construction techniques, which he later applied to the design and manufacturing of a number of mass housing projects, as well as the Bauhaus building in Dessau. In 1910, Gropius ended up leaving Behrens' practice with fellow employee Adolf Meyer to set up their own architectural office in Berlin. Gropius and Meyer soon joined the Deutsche Werkbund, or German Workers' Federation, which was a group of designers and architects who embraced the utilization of modern industrial mass production with traditional art and design. During this time, they designed an array of objects, anything from furniture to cutlery, while concurrently completing larger projects, most famously the facade of the Fages factory in Alfred an der Lahn, Germany. This factory was a gleaming example of the Modernist principle of form-reflecting function with the desire to provide more pleasant working conditions for employees. Gropius further elaborated on these ideas in one of his most influential writings, The Development of Industrial Buildings, which was published in 1913. Unfortunately, their work was put on pause by the outbreak of the First World War. Gropius was drafted into the German army in August 1914. He served as a cavalry officer on the Western Front, where he was wounded and nearly killed. He came to receive the Iron Cross for bravery for his service. Luckily, Gropius survived this time of his life and would continue to spread his revolutionary design ethos. Following the war, Gropius threw himself back into his architecture and design practice and would experience one of his most fruitful periods of activity. Despite previously and intentionally staying out of politics, he now empathized with the left and saw the role that architecture and design could play in a post-war social revolution. In 1919, he became the master of the Grand Ducal Saxonian School of Arts and Crafts in Weimar, which he eventually rechristened as the Staatliches Bauhaus Weimar. This was the conception and birth of the now world-famous Bauhaus. While Gropius was only 36 when the Bauhaus opened, his reputation and image was already prevalent enough to attract a world-class faculty. The teachers came from all over the world and from a number of diverse design backgrounds. Some of the faculty included Paul Klee, Johannes Itten, Joseph and Annie Albers, Herbert Bayer, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, and Wasily Kandinsky. All of these avant-garde talents were brought together through Gropius's vision of utilizing workshop-based education to experiment and contribute to post-war society through art and architecture. The school's experimental approach was outlined in Gropius's 1919 founding manifesto. He wrote that all fields of art and design were equal and aimed to reunite art forms that had been separated in traditional art and design schools in the past. His new educational system sought to develop its students' minds as well as provide technical skills, bringing the disciplines of art, craft, and technology into one individual skill set, yielding students that could make, not just think. All students completed a preliminary foundations course before specializing in classes directed by a craftsman, master of works, and an artist, a master of form. This is reflected in many design schools even to this day. During my time at university, we completed a similar foundations year before diving more deeply into our chosen discipline of design. This ensured all students had at least some baseline understanding of other fields outside of their own, creating more well-rounded practitioners. At the Bauhaus, they studied fine arts and crafts, as well as the technology of materials and production. Collaboration between disciplines was strongly encouraged, and students were taught to consider the larger societal and environmental impact when making design decisions. Again, many of these, at the time revolutionary ideas, are now cornerstones of our modern design education system. The mid-1920s was a pivotal period for Gropius in the Bauhaus. In 1923, he began implementing a change in the school, focusing less on craft-based, handmade output to one that adapted to our world of machines, radios, and fast cars. To develop this rethought system, he emphasized a new focus on functional, affordable design and industrial production. This idea was kickstarted by a number of things, one of which was the arrival of Theo van Doesburg to the Bauhaus. Doesburg was a Dutch artist associated with the Steel and constructivist movement advocate L. Lissitzky from Weimar. Both of these individuals were firmly embedded in the field of industrial design. Most impactful on choosing this new direction for the school, however, was that in 1922, a condition of the school's renewed funding was that it start to publicly demonstrate its accomplishments. This change in direction sparked a number of issues amongst the faculty, causing some to leave the school entirely due to conflicting ideologies. In 1925, due to pressure from a newly elected right-wing government in Weimar, Gropius decided to move the Bauhaus to the industrial city of Dessau, where it would experience what many would consider to be its most fruitful period. This reset gave him the opportunity to design a new school building alongside a series of homes for professors. He thought of this as the chance to show off what he thought of as the future of design and architecture, designing the school and housing as one cohesive system. This would become a beacon of Gropius's ideology, which can still be visited to this day. Unfortunately, the move did not save the school from increasing tensions caused by Gropius's push towards a more industrial framework for education. These disagreements became a major issue in 1926, when the Bauhaus found itself facing financial issues. As a result of the monetary struggle, Gropius was forced to ask his faculty to accept a 10% pay cut. Kandinsky and Klee both refused, with Klee eventually writing to Gropius saying, "I will look gloomily ahead to further negotiations, and am afraid of something that was avoided even during the worst phase at Weimar, an inner disruption." Concurrently with the discontent of the faculty, Gropius had the additional battle of facing increasingly right-wing politics in Dessau and throughout the rest of Germany. He would come to face a number of external pressures from local politicians, as well as internal pressure from his faculty. All of this came to a head in 1928 when Gropius's frustrations caused him to leave the Bauhaus and move to Berlin to open a private practice. He was succeeded as Bauhaus director by Hans Meyer. For a closer look at the history of the Bauhaus, check out the video linked in the description where we dive deeper into the school's ethos and incredible output of world-renowned designers. Between 1926 and 1932, Gropius worked on a number of large-scale housing projects throughout Germany and surrounding areas. Through these projects, he hoped to fight against the lack of affordable housing during the interwar period by developing a number of cost-effective, prefabricated concrete building components which utilized modern industrial production techniques to later be assembled on site. While the production of these houses was quite industrial in nature, the structure's designs focused on creating much better living conditions for poorer families through the utilization of modern, light-filled interiors and their seamless integration with natural green spaces. Although his practice was booming at the time, the shifting political landscape in Europe during the 1930s began to negatively impact Gropius's career. The Gestapo forced the Bauhaus to close in 1933, all while Gropius's designs for various government projects were rejected due to his left-leaning ideology. With the Nazi Party labeling modern art and architecture as un-German and degenerative as a whole to their society, those affiliated with the Bauhaus swiftly began to move away, emigrating all over the world. In 1934, with the assistance of the English architect Maxwell Fry, Gropius and his family fled Germany for Britain. They were fortunate enough to be able to relocate to Hampstead in London. Here, he worked as part of the Modernist Isokon group, with other designers and architects who shared a similar ethos. During his time in London, he designed a school in Impington as well as a house for playwright Ben Levy in London. In 1937, the Dean of Harvard's Graduate School of Design, Joseph Hudnut, visited Gropius in London and would soon offer him a position at the institution. Hudnut was enamored by Gropius's innovative approach to design and architectural education. As a result, he tasked Gropius with reinventing Harvard's traditional design curriculum in a similar way to what he did in his era of directing the Bauhaus. Gropius accepted and would soon move to the United States, along with his protege Marcel Breuer. In 1938, Gropius was selected to be chair of the Department of Architecture. That same year, he built a house for himself and his family in Lincoln, Massachusetts, now known as the Gropius House. This building marked a pivotal point in American design and architecture as it served as an introduction to international modernism. During this era, Gropius co-founded the Architects Collaborative with a budding new generation of American architects. Building upon the collaborative ethos Gropius had created at the Bauhaus, the collaborative went on to become one of the most well-known post-war architectural practices in the United States. In 1944, Gropius became a naturalized citizen of the United States, and over the next 2 decades continued his prolific architectural output, for which he received numerous accolades, including election into the National Academy of Design and the AIA Gold Medal. After a lifetime of accomplishments, both academically and professionally, he eventually passed away in Boston, Massachusetts, following a short illness in 1969. Gropius is remembered for a number of things, most prevalent of which being his new approach to design education, his innovative use of industrial materials, and his spreading of European modernism throughout the world. The Bauhaus forced those alive at the time to redefine the way we look at design and architecture as a whole through cross-disciplinary collaboration and an embrace of modern industrial techniques. Even today, we see his vast impact on art, architecture, and design through our existing education system and in many of the things and spaces we interact with on a day-to-day basis. Gropius's Bauhaus movement will live on for generations to come and will likely always act as a point of reference for designers of all disciplines. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. This has been kind of a little bit of history about Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus, and obviously somebody who has accomplished a number of other really incredible things. Walter Gropius is definitely one of my biggest inspirations, both as a designer and as a human. So I hope learning a little bit more about him was fun for you. I know it was fun for me digging into this topic. So if you enjoyed this video, it would be awesome if you would leave a like. If you stuck around to this point, that's amazing, and I really, really appreciate your time. This is looking like it's going to be a little bit of a longer video. But yeah, as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you want to stick around for future content like this, it would be awesome if you'd subscribe, and other than that, I will catch you in the next one. Later.